renewals on the horizon for many businesses, there's no better time to take charge of your Microsoft 365 costs. We're thrilled to offer our listeners an exclusive 5% discount on your current spending, but don't wait. This offer won't last long. We're so confident with the savings you can achieve with Tenant Detective, our Microsoft 365 licensed savings app, that we're putting our money where our mouth is. Tenant Detective can help you uncover additional savings. Think 20 to 30% by identifying unused licenses and optimizing your subscriptions based on actual usage. This isn't just a discount. It's our way of demonstrating how much better we are as a cloud solution provider compared to your current partner. Don't let this opportunity slip away. Contact us today to claim your 5% discount and start maximizing your budget.
Hey, Cut the Shit listeners. You can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Go check us out.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Cut the Shit, a podcast series that aims to take a closer look at the impact of the IT industry, both the good and the bad. Cut the Shit is brought to you by Plow Networks, a managed IT services company based just outside Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bryan Link, COO here at Plow, and I'll be your host for this series. I'll ask questions, and with the help of our guests, try to dig deep on some of the key challenges we all face dealing with IT. So with that, let's cut the shit and get started. On today's episode, it's my pleasure to have MacKenzie Brown from Blackpoint Cyber as our guest, and in person no less. Mac is a certified security business rock star, so having her join us is a real treat. After stints at Optiv and Microsoft, Mac joined Blackpoint about a year and a half ago as their VP of Security, where she runs their advisory pursuit group. Mac's team, and Blackpoint as a whole, has gone all in on what they call identity-based security. So we'll talk some about that, what it means, and why it matters to businesses both big and small. In addition, we get Mac to tell us her origin story and what it's like being a bit of a unicorn in the IT security space. This was a really fun conversation, so I hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, my conversation with MacKenzie Brown.
MacKenzie, welcome to Cut the Shit. How are you today?
I'm good. Happy to be in Nashville.
I was going to say,
awesome.
thanks for coming to the office. We're glad to have you here. I don't always get to do these in person, so it's good to have you.
It was good timing with the race coming up, so I'm excited.
Very good. Well, you do your own podcast, so you should be a pro in this chair of asking questions. So you're in the hot seat today on the other side, so we'll try to make that as
This feels very Dr. Phil, like you're going to give me some sort of diagnosis at the end of this.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Before we jump in, I always like to ask this question just because sometimes we get some interesting comments and things that people are thinking about or that they've seen. So what's the most interesting use of technology or a hack that you've either seen or heard about or have used lately?
Well, and this is in no way a plug for Microsoft and Copilot, but I have just recently jumped on the Copilot train. I do use it actually at the end of every day. I feel like between all of the communications I do, I just ask, can you summarize all of my Teams messages and what I was supposed to be doing? Because I tend to go off in tangents or agree to things and say yes, and then I'll get a ping like 3 weeks later like, hey, did you remember? You promised me your firstborn. I was like, oh no, I don't. I did not remember that.
And the summaries have been good. I mean, it's working?
It works really well, especially for emails. I just, and being on the road, I have this tendency where I'll read and I'll nod, and in my mind I respond, and I absolutely don't. I just fly off into the atmosphere.
Well, that's interesting because we've got a lot of clients who are either thinking about using it or testing it, and a lot of times they don't. You got to have a use case. Like you have to have it's a sort of a general purpose capability.
It's not
right?
cheap at all.
And it's not cheap. So that's good. Our listeners can think about that as an option for using it. So
yeah, we found that we've given it to most of our C-suite to start, and all the executives are starting to test it out now too. But it's mostly just probably for the same exact reason. So we have someone following up on us. It's our own personal AI mommy. That's what we need.
There you go. All right, cool. Well, let's get to it then. To get us started, give us kind of a quick thumbnail sketch on your background and sort of how you got started in technology.
Yeah, happy to. I have a very unorthodox background of how I got into cybersecurity. I needed to pay the rent is kind of the best way of putting it. And I went to Boise State University. I was actually studying theater and communications because I did theater for a long time and had no idea what I wanted to do in life, and my father's actually an infrastructure manager. He's been my entire childhood. He used to work at Boise Cascade, and I remember during divorce weekends, I would be able to hang out on all the fun, like movable chairs and make paper planes and stuff while he's deep in some server rack. So in my mind, it was a lot of fun. But now looking back on it, it was just him making life work. So I remember he called me up. I didn't know what I was doing, and he said, hey, we have some help desk IT support positions for the state of Idaho. I think you should do something with your life. And so I did something with my life.
So that's how it started. So you joined the family business, so to speak.
Yeah. Not nepotism per se, but certainly him just saying like, hey, you can make $14 an hour. And I was like, wow,
right.
Way better than Outback Steakhouse. So definitely came from some humble beginnings, and got in cybersecurity actually through that route. Started doing self-training certifications, and applied for my first analyst position, post some auditing, and the rest is downhill from there. I was formerly at Microsoft, though, the most recent employment, for 4 years on the detection and response team. So we like to call it the murder cleanup zone at Blackpoint, but that's absolutely really what I did. So often of what people would see on the news as far as major cyber attacks or data breaches, it was something we had been handling for a month at that time. So right. I definitely, as an incident manager on that team, I was on the forefront of being able to, I kind of compare it to fantasy football, put together all the roles between my threat hunters, my forensic analysts, my lead investigators, and then I ship them off to some distance area in the world, and they do their doodly-doo and investigate, and then we were able to give the diagnoses essentially at the end, and help people really recover from some major disastrous situations. So honored.
Translate that then from Microsoft into Blackpoint, kind of use that as a lead in maybe to kind of give an intro to Blackpoint Cyber.
Yeah, so I think, so I've been at Blackpoint about 1.5 years now, but when I had first met the MSP space and the channel as a whole was at Rite of Boom. Did you go to Rite of Boom?
I didn't.
Oh.
Told you, I don't.
This year,
we don't go to I don't do conferences. I mean,
it's in your favorite place though. It's in Vegas.
Yeah, which just makes it even better.
Yeah,
right? It's exactly where I want to go. So.
Yeah, so in the lovely Vegas. Now, at the time, it was in Dallas, which we probably would have went to when it was there. But I went to Rite of Boom. I was asked to speak on an incident response panel. Lead like an incident response panel. And, through Andrew Morgan and Wes Spencer and the whole crew. And I was amazed by the level of general community engagement, camaraderie, like that the channel in the MSP space was. And this was just one of many conferences I've learned. MSPs really like to test their liver. And they're very active in the summer. I have so many Delta miles now because of this. But I was able to have these one-on-one conversations where I felt like people actually were actively engaged and interested in cybersecurity. And that's actually where I met, the PAX 8 folks and then the Blackpoint folks. And I was able to come onto Blackpoint as VP of Security originally to help kind of build out our compliance program and really be able to take what we're seeing from our SOC and then apply those learnings to the community or to the channel. And then I've actually recently taken over our adversary pursuit group, which is far more attuned to my background, which is threat intelligence and threat research. So we basically take all the interesting things that get escalated up to us from the SOC, and we try to enable our analysts through finished intelligence. Hey, you're seeing this. We did some reverse engineering, so we've decompiled this malware, and this is what it's doing. Or hey, we were able to take those indicators of compromise and maybe do attribution. We think that this is pre-ransomware, and it's this ransomware as a service group. So we're really able to be on back. I guess I'm a little more left of boom at Blackpoint Cyber.
Gotcha.
So at Blackpoint Cyber, we do managed detection and response, as you know, SOC as a service. So I get to be back in the SOC,
right.
Not murder cleanup, but.
And for us, obviously, you guys are a partner. It's a service that we provide to our clients too, because we're not a SOC. We don't do that. We don't do managed detection and response. That's a big job, and you need.
You don't want to do it.
We don't want to do it. You're absolutely right. We don't want to do
You're
it.
You're too busy already.
Totally fair. We do not want to do it. We want the best people to do it. Not that we couldn't maybe be good at it, but it's not what we do, right? We do things securely. We don't do security.
Right. Yeah. And you might be more murder cleanup.
Yeah,
then.
And sometimes. So let's start kind of at a high level, or maybe, we talked a little bit about this last night. When you think, people's idea of what security is, or sort of trying to get your arms around it is difficult, right? It oftentimes means different things to different people. So what are metaphors or analogies that you've either heard or that you use to help people kind of contextualize security, so that when you're talking about it, they understand where you're coming from, and you guys are talking about the same thing? Are there metaphors or analogies? I've heard the insurance analogy, there's other things. How do you sort of, when you're talking to folks, and again, now I'm talking about clients, like companies, organizations, not security people, right? We're sort of getting out of the jargon world, or the people who everybody knows what you're talking about, and the actual end users or the recipients of the services.
That's absolutely the hardest thing to do, is that translation piece. Because honestly, when you look at a business owner, the people, we partner with MSPs, and then they redistribute, as you know, to put it in layman's terms. But a mom and pop shop of, Bob's Potatoes, or, John's Pharmacy or something, they don't necessarily care about the nitty gritty, but they do know that it is detrimental to their business if they had a cyber attack.
They read the news, they know what's up.
Yeah,
they know bad things can happen, but they may not have any idea of what that really entails.
And we're all desensitized to the headlines constantly in the media, and there's so much more that goes behind it. I think what the most difficult part of translating it to business owners and companies that aren't in IT, or they're not in security, is translating the risk to them, because they understand that. And risk is something that you can do the server room to boardroom translation in a way that you are telling them the IT things, but you're reformatting it to be more aligned with the concept of risk intelligence, and that they know that, hey, this is, and risk usually has a dollar amount attached to it. And I find that when you're speaking to business owners, that dollar amount conversation and that conversion helps a lot more. The other thing I was thinking about too, and we had briefly talked about it, was the hurricane that just came through. And I'm watching this video. I'm not going to say TikTok, but I was watching this video of this woman, and she lives right on the waterfront of Louisiana, and she's like, I'm here to get ready with me as we prepare for a hurricane. As fun as you can make that. But so she's showing her house. First off, this house is on like 50-foot stilts, like it's way up in the air, and there's grass, there's a yard, but the water is right there. Then she films over to the floodgates behind her, and these also are extremely large, and she's saying like, oh yeah, once those are closed, they're closed, no one's getting in and out. And I'm like, okay, so you are staying in your house. Interesting. This is weird. And then she's like taking off the fan blades on her fan, and they're setting debris on fire, and they're doing all of these interesting preparation things. But I think that the same thing is what we all do. We all do this. I mean, we don't all experience hurricanes, but we all do preparation in the event for something to happen.
Right.
And so to use that as an analogy is really been the most, provoking in a way, thought-provoking of if you can find a way to say, what is the worst thing to happen to you as a business owner or as just a person? And it would be like, oh, my house would get set on fire. Okay, well, when you hear a storm's coming, what do? You're watering, you're leaving the hose or the sprinklers on, you're watering down your roof, you're packing up your essentials, you're putting the dogs in the car. I mean, you do all these preparation things, and I think that's the way that you translate it to business owners, is like, there's a dollar amount attached to the risk, and you know that the risk is, the likelihood is probably high. It's not gonna not happen.
Yeah. Because
I can explain to them that, at the end of the day, when they experience a cyber attack, it was something minor. You got phished, and your, person was compromised. That person was in accounting, but they had access to this data. Their account was then leveraged to install IT tools. That threat actor laterally moved throughout the environment, and then was able to identify that data, and then they staged and deployed ransomware. It might be easy to explain it to them, but they don't care. All they heard was ransomware, they took our data.
Right.
That's all they care about. So if you can find a way to translate it into risk, I think that that's the best way to do it.
Makes sense, and I do think, kind of along that theme, one of the challenges that we deal with, and so I'm interested to get your perspective since you live in this every day, is it feels a little bit, every industry's got jargon. IT is no exception. Maybe we've invented it. I don't know, because it seems like we've got more than any other organization or any other industry I've ever worked in. But security in of itself has its own sort of specific jargon, right? And it's got a little bit of alphabet soup of acronyms and that sort of thing. So let's begin with MDR. Talk to me about, obviously it means managed detection and response, right? Yeah. But whatever, that doesn't really, so what? What does that mean? What does that mean to you guys? When you say, if someone says, what do you do? And you say, we're an MDR, well, what the hell does that mean? Give us a definition of that, and then what should a company who's buying an MDR service, what should they expect to get from that? Because I think that's where there's actually a lot of range, or there's a lot of difference between what MDR may mean based on the various solutions. And then there's the EDR and XDR and the other things, so we can maybe talk about that. But just start with sort of defining MDR from Blackpoint's perspective, and what should an organization expect to get if they're paying for that service? And
MXDR and
you can
XDR, MXDR, MDR, managed EDR, it's exhaustive, and it's probably not going to stop. The new one that we saw, which is actually probably closer to what we do, is identity-based detection. ITDR, like we need one more acronym added to the soup there. But I like to think of MDR as this thing where you're looking for security operations as a service. But security operations could be, hey, we're just monitoring the alerts that are coming in. And that's kind of going more into the realm of managed EDR. And managed EDR is like they're making sure the cows go out to pasture and they come back. But they're not feeding the cows, they're not inspecting the cows for diseases. It's not just because I'm in Nashville I'm making this type of metaphor, but...
We don't have any cows.
You might not have any cows.
That's fine, yeah.
I'm from Idaho. We have lots of cow shit. Lots of cow shit. And this is called Cut the Shit, so...
That's right.
We'll cut the shit on the MDR side and the definition side there, but the difference between MDR is what I like to think when you are doing your shopping or you're trying to decide which vendor to go with, or when it comes to MDR, it's focus on the R. And that's frankly what I don't see a lot of companies doing. And they set it up contractually too, so you can opt out of the R if you'd like. So a lot of people are like, look, I don't want to get a call every night. Just send me an email. No, we don't want you touching any buttons or isolating any systems, because
it might disrupt us.
It might disrupt business.
Right.
Which is understandable, but for us, we approach it differently. Obviously, we will call, we will email you, we will get a hold of you until the cows come home, to maintain the cow reference. But also, we will take action. We spend a lot of time, spending more time tuning our detection mechanisms and really being able to train our analysts to be at that elite level where what they're seeing, without a doubt, they can triage in a fast amount of time to say, yes, this is known bad, this is malicious, we're able to monitor it. We know that your electrical engineer, this is something that happened last week, should not be running PS Exec or installing tools. And they were like, no, he doesn't even get on a laptop.
Right.
We're examining the user agent strings. We're looking at the geolocation and IP, even though it's going to get spoofed anyway. And we're looking at the patterns to say, this is known bad, high fidelity, we're going to take action.
Right.
And then hopefully you pick up the phone, right? We hope that we can get to that point. But the amount of dwell time it takes for an attacker once they've assumed administrative privileges, essentially, and they've been able to escalate, it's, you maybe have 20 minutes before, if they're planning something more destructive. So we can usually tell, and especially in the MDR space, we have the unique telemetry of, we focus on initial access, we focus on identity detection with context, really what is that end user doing? Because if we can stop it at that point, disable an account, isolate a system that's probably compromised, we've just alleviated so much more that could happen. And coming from the incident response world, I know the investigation that comes after that, of course, we're going through murder cleanup, blood spatter analysis, recovery, all of that stuff's going on. is a lot more threat actors. Oh, they went through your email inboxes and did these keyword searches, or they, installed these file shares and they exfiltrated some of this information, or they've deleted your backups. So we're lucky we caught it or didn't catch it, And so we look at some of those activities. If we can catch it earlier on, then it's a lot more promising.
Right.
And when people are shopping for MDR and they're saying, I want something that is going to stop it without a doubt, because again, we've had that risk conversation and we know what a data breach costs, and we know our cyber insurance and an investigative team and all of our partners and the reputational follow-up that we'll have to do. All of that is not worth one electrical engineer's system and account being compromised and doing some terrible activity. That's not their fault, and maybe they did click a link. And so we're just past the point when you're looking for MDR as a solution, focusing on that R, which is their response. Okay. You want a vendor that does something, that actually takes action, because you understand that you have 20 minutes before, doomsday, hypothetically.
Yeah. You mentioned threat hunting, and you've talked a little bit about sort of what the adversary pursuit group is up to and sort of the focus. Talk a little bit to us. I mean, just let's try to stay a little high level. Let's not get too nerdy.
Okay.
But what kind of evolution? What are you guys seeing in terms of evolution of threats? Are things changing maybe over the past 12 to 18 months, or is it just more of the same? And in particular, we'll get to, because I want to talk a little bit about AI as it relates to both what the bad guys are doing and what you guys are doing. But has that had any impact with what, it's sort of taken off, right? We've sort of gotten to escape velocity with large language models and sort of where we are with some. Is that making things more complicated or different for you guys at this point?
Okay. Well, on the first side, what was the first question?
Just around threat. What
the
evolution, the evolution.
Threat landscape. All right, so as far as kind of what we're seeing threat landscape wise, not a lot has changed. I want to say about a little over a year ago, we, went live with our cloud response. We've basically invented MDR for M365. That came with the consequences of, wow, this is really noisy. There's a lot going on. And so I'll bring that into the AI portion of it. But we see really the attacks in the cloud specifically being the primary area that we're most concerned about from a threat landscape side. And that the end users or the organizations aren't spending the time to set a security baseline, whether it's Azure or AWS or Google, whatever they're using, especially when those are typically built in. Those settings exist, but they're not spending the time to do it.
They're not doing the configuration.
Yeah, right. And what we're seeing as far as whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, hybrid, whatever you look at it, identity is that new perimeter. So protecting your end users and your admins, of course, those accounts that have special privileges, that is ideally something that hasn't changed as far as what makes a threat actor successful in their mission objective.
In reality, the cloud has just increased the surface, right? Because at the end of the day,
it's made it wide open, and it's often given privileges to people. It's destroyed the concept of least privilege in many cases.
Right.
When they don't take the time to work with their MSP or with their internal IT to actually strengthen and harden their cloud, turn on conditional access policies, right? Use MFA, put in the time to identify your trusted IPs and trusted locations, the things that we really need to do, because identity with context is what we're looking for from a detection
and that's really
side.
Good hygiene more than it is. That's not, to your point, that hasn't changed. That's not really new.
And it helps though if we can put them in diversified groups to say, when we're looking at an account that is doing suspicious activity, it's less time for us to triage when we can know for a fact, hey, that user definitely has never ran these processes before in their system. They've never done these things. They shouldn't have access to it. And their activity is nefarious in question. Even if it was an insider threat, you would want us to stop it.
Right.
And so I think that the threat landscape, not a lot has changed. Threat actors are installing legitimate IT tools. They're abusing your RMMs or your remote access management platforms. I'm trying to keep this high level. They're basically using living off the land techniques where they just get on a system. They use built-in system processes and services that allow them to do a lot that's not necessarily going to trigger an endpoint detection type of alert, whether it be AV or EDR.
Right. So it's those two weak points, right? The point of entry from identity, and then the lateral movement because of lack of segmentation or lack of, you've got broader access, right?
It lets them blend into the noise.
Right.
If they can act like a normal IT system administrator, then it's who's already PS exec 3 times a day, maybe more on all systems. That's not going to be strange, right? And this is where we talk about like privileged access management, where that comes into play. And so this is why the identity side we're hitting on so hard, and it does go hand in hand with cloud, is if you don't protect your end users, and not blame them, because security awareness training is great, we got to train them, but if you don't understand how to protect and identify behavioral anomalies because you know who those end users are, you've done all of the policies you can to kind of create those defense in depth buffer zones, then you're putting yourself at more risk, because the minute we're examining 20 different PowerShell executions and command executions, we can't tell who's
it's
who's
hard
who.
to know what's good or bad at that point. I mentioned AI, and that was kind of the second part of the question. So let's kind of roll into that. So talk about AI in terms of what are you guys seeing from the other side, kind of the sort of the dark side in terms of where they're leveraging it, and then talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with it to try to strengthen your capabilities and also make you more efficient.
Well, if I was a threat actor and I'm using AI, the best thing.
And maybe the answer there is they're not using it at all. Maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know. I'm just curious.
I think they're using it, and if they're doing it from a threat perspective, where they're a Hydra organization, and they've literally, that's probably the nerdiest thing I've said, but they've like installed
We're not done yet. You got more time.
I know. I can get nerdier, but they've made their own LLM, and they're able to execute across multiple organizations. Maybe that's going on. But really, I think the biggest benefit to AI for bad guys is their execution of legitimacy in their phishing email constructs. So for them to be able to now not have grammatical errors, linguistic errors.
Right, the classics kind of,
Exactly.
the things that when you look at phishing emails from back in the day, you're like, how did somebody not figure out
how did you click on it? Well, they've definitely upped the sophistication.
Right.
So if anything, they're making things, they've upped the sophistication of their social engineering attempts. I think also AI, at least I use it all the time, is for reconnaissance purposes and discovery. Maybe they want to get information on a target they have. They can probably do open source intelligence hunting a lot faster so that they can create a more targeted attack. They can also pull different emails, say they've compromised a user and they want to pull different emails, and then they want to do an analysis across them to identify what most common terms are used. How does this target that they've compromised speak? And that plays back into the sophistication of it. So
it's up their capabilities.
Right. So AI is just helping them blend in,
which is sort of how most of these compromises are happening, right? There's a lot of business email compromise, right? It's a lot of phishing.
Oh yeah. Phishing and business email compromise still hasn't gone anywhere, and it's still really successful. It's a good business.
Yeah, for sure. So how about on your side, in terms of Blackpoint? How are you guys leveraging AI, and what's it doing for you at this point?
So right now for AI, what we've built internally with our AI team is building our own learning model. The way that we see the future going as far as our security operations center goes is you have, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 analysts. Tier 1 are really the person ringing the bell because they see smoke in the distance. We want to upgrade that person to tier 2, tier 3, where we're up training them so they're becoming hunters. They can do more proactive analysis of what they're seeing, and they're more hands-on from a response, a forensic side, really giving them more of the curated analyst skill sets that you see from analysts who've been doing it, 15 years.
Right.
And so we want, in order to uptrain them, we have to say, okay, how much smoke is in the distance? What's the noisy smoke? Whether that's RDP logins, whether that's VPN noise, cloud response is a big one, right? Is how do we now focus on utilizing AI and training our learning model to target those noisy areas that take up all our tier 1 analyst time, so that there's a layer of validation and vetting that occurs before it gets to the analyst desks. And now that they can actually focus on more threat hunting techniques and things that, again, we're able to act quickly and respond, but they're able to really validate even quicker on their end.
Right, because they can digest more of that, to your point, that noisy, more of those indicators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's transition a little, thinking kind of move back to the client side, and they're sitting there, engaging conversations with their MSP, somebody like us, or you've been brought to the table, you're partnering, with someone to talk to them, and just as the experience you've had in those conversations, what are some of the common misperceptions kind of about cybersecurity that you feel like ought to be dispelled? What do you get from these where you're like, it would be great if we could have people not think this or that?
Right. I think at the highest level, I have this conversation a lot in the MSP space. I have technical conversations all day long with IT guys, who are also, half of them are CEOs too, because we're in the MSP space, right? They all own their own business. And the biggest misconception, I think, is there's this universal divide between cybersecurity and IT, when really cybersecurity is so deeply built on IT fundamentals and foundations. And so when you meet people who are like, oh, I'm not in security, but then I look at their background, they know more about Windows domain and networking and things that I'm like, oh, you're in security.
Right.
You are security, by the way. Whether it fails or succeeds, you as IT or network administrator, you are security.
Right.
And so I do find that the biggest misconception is they, in their mind, have separated security from their job, when to me, it's the same role. And we would be benefiting more if we're pulling people from a recruiting stance, from IT and from networking. That's who I want to hire. I want to know someone. They don't need to list off the OSI model, not that anyone's even talking about that anymore, but like, I need someone who didn't just exit their college curriculum that covers like the basics of cyber,
right,
because they can't configure a firewall.
Right.
Like I actually would rather have the person that knows how to configure the firewall and knows how to operate on the edge and knows how to work with networking
segmentation
tools.
And that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, that understands Windows and Mac and how to put it all together, and Linux and the things that we need. Like, I need someone who has been in it rather than someone who is just barely learning the touch of the surface of what cybersecurity is, whether that be GRC and frameworks. Now, I think that over time, what I've learned with MSPs too is that most of them are doing cybersecurity now, and they're actively engaged, but they're able to execute a lot faster because they understand those foundational concepts that come into play from an IT and networking perspective.
So there's sort of a false distinction really between traditional IT, particularly on the networking and sort of admin or systems admin side, and cybersecurity. Right?
Yeah.
You can't really separate them.
No, they're married.
Yeah. So if you were running an operating company, so you're talking to a CEO somewhere, and he or she says, we're not doing anything security-wise, where should we start? What's the one thing we ought to do first? What would you tell them?
That's where you insert ASMR, beer.
Yeah, exactly.
Noise.
Well, let's assume they don't have any
beer.
They don't have any computers yet, but we're just not that they've been
That's
operating.
That's great. I
for
tell
10
them
years.
don't get any computers.
Yeah, stay off
email is not useful.
Stay off the internet.
Screw the email.
Send paper.
Yeah, cut that shit out, and then everything's paper, but shred it when you're done. Only communicate through Morse code. As far as so you're just saying zero.
Yeah, I mean,
security.
where would you start? Like, if where should you start?
Where should they start? Well, understanding how many endpoints they have. Literally.
What do you have?
What do you have?
What would be first?
I mean, there's a reason that's like control number 1 and 2 and the CIS
you laugh about
controls.
That,
it really is.
Yeah, it's actually
it's
a harder problem to solve than people think, right?
It is, yeah. It's the hardest question for most of our customers to answer.
Right.
I mean, for us, we're just like, how many endpoints do you have? And they're like, well, why do you want to know that? Because you're asking us to monitor them.
Right.
We need to get our agent out to them. The same thing came from the incident response world, where that's the first question we ask. We're like, okay, so we have to deploy our tooling so that we can investigate and monitor the systems that are compromised. How many endpoints do they have? And it's like 4 dudes in a room looking at each other. They're like, I don't know.
I think it's about 200.
Yeah, maybe this many servers, this many workstations, member servers. And we're like, okay, that's not, okay. How many domain controllers do you have? Right? They better be able to answer that one. I will say, if I came across that situation, that's the first question I have. How many users do you have? And how many systems do you have? Because those are the most difficult things.
Right.
Then moving into cyber of explaining that to them and be like, what users are important and what users would be the most risky if they were kidnapped type of concept. Right. Making sure then it's like, okay, what systems do you have? What types of processes or software do you run? What don't you run? Honestly, to be able to secure an organization 100%, I would rather, now that I'm thinking about it, rather walk into a room where someone's like, we've done nothing. Where do we start?
Right.
If they
Instead
were
of having to undo things.
Right.
Yeah.
10 employees, 20 computers, I'd be like, this is easy. Let's do this. Because that's something that's actually manageable, and you can explain again those foundational concepts to them of protecting the user and then putting in all of the policies, taking out or blocking all the software that's not approved so they can only do XYZ, forcing them to do MFA even though they really hate it, but making it as easy as possible. And then going from there. And then being able to explain to them those same things that we're talking about, that identity. You want to protect every user. Not every user is equal. And so you want to be able to put in traditional least privilege concepts. Yeah. You know, only do what you need access to.
Yeah, and to your point around privilege access, right? If no one's doing anything yet, then you don't have to take anything away from anybody, right? Because what happens with privilege access management is that means somebody's getting ready to be, their life is getting ready to get more difficult.
I do find that it's weird how we've evolved from the point where, you know, you meet CFOs and CEOs and C-suite executives that are like, I want to have access to everything. And now they're all like, oh no, I'm not your scapegoat today. I want access to none of it.
Right.
You can call me and tell me the data. I will not touch anything. And so it's I think that's a positive evolution, that people are more concerned with doing
the hard way.
SEC filing. They're like, how do I avoid an SEC filing?
For sure. So kind of closing in on a couple things, but when thinking about working with an MDR partner like Blackpoint, so what do companies need to understand? So you guys come to the table, usually not standalone, right? You're coming in with a partner, so we'll just stick with that model, right? So you're working beside, alongside Plow in the case of helping a client. What do you want that client? What should that client understand? And this is as much helpful for me as it is for the people listening, right? What should they expect, or what do they need to understand about that relationship, and what should they expect from the MDR partner, either kind of at the beginning and then in an ongoing basis?
I think the best thing that they can understand, right, if you start from just the foundations of, this is your business, these are the risks that sit within your vertical, and this is what happens if you're breached. We have MDR. MDR will be monitoring all of your systems, and this is how they respond. Because of the level of risk associated, they're going to perform XYZ. They're going to do their analysis. They may isolate accounts. They may disrupt business to some extent, but not in a way that's going to be, going to be totally dramatic and you're going to notice. But it's because we see the risk that's sitting over here. And so I think the first thing is foundationally speaking with customers, so that's what they understand is that risk conversation.
Really around.
And you can give them kind of the opposite side of that. You would go with this MDR service, but let me tell you what this does. This is managed EDR in its finest. We've got EDR that you're paying for, and I know that probably hurts them because it's expensive, maybe. And you have this managed EDR or MDR company. They're just going to send you an email, and they'll let you know if something's funny is going on. And you're going to translate that email yourself, and then they're going to call Bryan in the middle of the night. Pretty much, right? Yes. And so I think if you have the risk conversation with them and then moving into, okay, here's what MDR is really doing for you. You can't afford an internal security team, nor can anyone, and you can't do 24/7 coverage. The likelihood of you getting hit is going to happen after office hours. So they're going to isolate systems, they're going to disable accounts. but I'm going to work with them as an MSP. So I'm actually going to be the person that's probably getting the call as well. And I'm getting notified in the same respect. And I can probably tell, because I know my customer, that is confirmed bad and this isn't good.
Right.
And I'm going to tell them, yes, disable the account, keep trying to get a hold of the end customer, and then we'll remediate it faster. I think if you can have that risk conversation with them earlier, it's a lot easier to understand, like, we're not disrupting your business, we're saving your business.
Right. Okay. Obviously, you know, the obvious statement here for somebody like you, right? You're a woman in IT security.
Oh no.
There's not a lot of you, right? You're not a unicorn, but you're pretty close, right? So what lessons, you know, so in terms of what have you learned from your career as you think about, you know, that aspect of your career, being a woman, you know, in a male-dominated field, right? What advice or what kind of guidance or suggestions would you give to other women who might be interested in getting into the field?
That there are different ways to get into the field. And the biggest way I can recommend in cybersecurity is start with an IT job. Really, first and foremost, work for an IT company, work for like an MSP, work for the government, start with that. Because if you can have the, almost like wearing your badge of honor, right? You've gone through the trenches, you've done a tour, like
right.
You've been in it, you've spent time, or during, maybe you survived the CrowdStrike outage and you had to go individually reboot every computer.
Right.
Then we could say like, oh wow, you have been through it.
Yeah.
So starting when you get into cybersecurity is one, networking, and then having that, starting your experience that you absolutely do need to have. And then the other thing is networking too. I think IT is such a unique place. I used to, when I was first getting into this field, I used to walk into conference room and count how many women in the room, and you know, that's not where my brain works anymore. I'm trying to look at it as all the same thing. And then those conversations that we have with other women, you'll know, because it just, I don't know, I think it hits different, where you're now able to have more EQ leveled conversations. You have this center of gravity that comes into play when you're speaking to other women in the field, because it's almost like, you know, like, oh, you've been through it.
Shared experience, right?
We're in it together.
Yeah,
and so, but I do think that experience part is so absolutely necessary. When we can collaborate and work in groups and stop looking at all the diversification of the group, but rather I'm learning something and I've been through it, then you're able to confidently go into your next career spot or your next move or in cyber in general. And confidence is such a difficult thing to obtain. Like, I personally don't feel confident in many ways. I have imposter syndrome all the time. And then I've also had conversations with some of the smartest people on my teams who have admitted to me that they have imposter syndrome. Mostly men, because they're mostly men on my team.
Right.
And that's a humbleness that's validating at times. But go through and understand that everyone feels that imposter syndrome. Everyone has struggles with the confidence levels. I think women definitely struggle with it a lot more. And maybe it doesn't go away, but you can, once you have those conversations and network out, you start to get more perspective around the more people that you can talk to realize, oh, you respect me, I respect you, and nothing's actually, I don't have a giant unicorn head, you know? Sometimes I do.
Sometimes you do. Right?
Yeah, sometimes
Only on Tuesdays.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. All right. So final question. So when you think about kind of where we are, the current state of cybersecurity, do you feel optimistic or pessimistic about kind of the future? And you can take that in kind of maybe shorter term and longer term, maybe give two parts to that, and then maybe why or why not.
I had a really good mentor at one time, and he actually gave me some advice. He said, you know, I remember I was working with a customer that was really difficult, and it was one of the IT guys that were helping us do recovery. And he was like, you know, you just got to learn, some of these people have been in it so long that the longer you're doing cybersecurity, the more pessimistic you get. And so that kind of got ingrained in me. I'm like, cool. So like, as I gray, my hair grays more, and I'm paying more money to cover it up. I'm getting more pessimistic, and I'm going to soon sit on a porch and be like, get off my yard. And But I've actually feel like I've twisted that thought recently, and maybe it's because I'm not in IR. So I will say, if you want to feel pessimistic about the way the world is going, go into incident response.
Clean up all the messes. Right?
Yeah, go be everyone's therapist for a day while you rebuild servers. And so I do think that I've kind of switched moving left of boom absolutely more. And also, to be honest, I'm more optimistic about the way it's going just in my experience with the MSPs. Just working with managed service providers in the channel in general is their level of engagement and not excitability, but to actually take cybersecurity seriously. I see this disruption in the MSSP space because of what MSPs are doing. They're not just looking at security services, but they are like, no, security is ingrained into the services we already provide. Right. And I find that engagement level and the interest in taking security more seriously, but also they're learning at the same time, that's made me more optimistic about where we're going in life, because I do believe MSPs are critical infrastructure. They're supporting SMB space. CISA has come out talking about SMB being critical infrastructure. It keeps the wheels turning, keeps the economy going. Right. And they're also supporting major energy, utilities, the things that we need covered by MSPs too, and people just don't realize that. And so I have a lot more optimism in the way that we're moving in cybersecurity because of MSPs and just being at Blackpoint for the past year and being able to have those conversations. They care, and not only do they care, but they are imperative to the success of where, protecting critical infrastructure goes.
Gotcha. Well, with that, we'll leave that there, and we'll kind of wrap up. I always like to wrap up with one personal question. It's not that personal, but it is personal. I know you travel a lot and you've been busy, but can you tell us something that you've watched or read lately that you think others ought to check out? And it doesn't have to be about work.
I am absolutely like a movie and show junkie. What I've watched recently, there's so much. I watched Beetlejuice, but it was stupid.
The new one? It wasn't, you didn't like it?
No, it was fine. It was just a modern day Beetlejuice. It wasn't as nostalgic. Like, it was nostalgic, but I kind of missed the 90s overview, like overlay type of filming. Before CGI, I thought CGI ruined the nostalgia. It was so
groundbreaking when it first came out, right? Because there wasn't anything like that. Yeah. And now it's not that groundbreaking. The best shows that I have just finished up recently, Succession is great. Have you watched that? I have.
That is fantastic. And then as far as movie goes, this is probably gonna sound nerdy, but like Dune. I just watched Dune 2 for the fourth time, and my friend had a birthday party for it and everything, so we all dressed up in Dune, but it's so good. It's so well done. So yes, Dune is what I'm watching, what I've recently watched lately, and I'll watch probably 10 more times.
Gotcha. All right. Last question. Tell us if you can remember, your first technology memory as a child. And it could be
But then you're going to age me.
Well, see, you're a lot younger than me, so it's fine, but that's okay. Because I've asked this question who are, 65, okay, and so theirs are way different.
First, gosh, I mean, I'm in my head, I'm going back. iPod. I'm older than an iPod.
I was going to say, wait a minute.
I thought I was cool because I got an iPod. Well, that was when I was cool. Yeah. We all shared the same computer, so that doesn't count. Growing up in a poorer family. And let's see, CD player, moving further back than that, and the Game Boy. Further back than a Game Boy, further back than a PlayStation. Honestly, it was those first technology. When you really want to listen to music, no, because that's also an auxiliary cable. It's when you have the tape thing that you put in the tape thing, and it's got the auxiliary cable so you can plug it into your CD player.
Yes.
That's the most innovative technology that I first got my hands on, is when I'm like, I really love my CD player, but I'd love to listen. I can't play it in the car.
Yeah, so you played it through a cassette tape.
Yeah, just for my mom to aggressively be like, we're not listening to that. But yes, that's the most innovative tech past dial-up, basically, waiting to play Duke Nukem on the computer before my brother finished. So.
Very good, very good. Well, McKenzie, thanks for taking time out to be on Cut the Shit. We really appreciate it.
And
thanks for being here in Nashville.
Yeah, happy to be here. Only 4 more days left, so wish me luck.
Good deal.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would become a subscriber wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, That would really help us out. Or you can just go old school and tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, and hell, anybody else who you think might want to hear something like this to listen in. If you're on social media, make sure to follow us on TikTok at CutTheShitPod, all one word, where we post lots of clips from the podcast. And last but not least, you can also watch the YouTube version of the show on our YouTube channel at Plow Networks. Until next time, take care and have a great day.